So, hey, I'm Lucy Zarlingo. I am a career B2B marketer. I've spent time in organizations such as Dell, Thomson Reuters, Dun& Bradstreet. Most recently, I've been in CMO roles at smaller SaaS organizations or software organizations in the social good and HR tech space. Today, I'm sitting down with Jonathan from Demandspring. He's going to do an introduction briefly, and we're going to talk through a little bit around how to move beyond AI experimentation. I know that that's something that's really top of mind today. There's a lot of experimentation going on right now with marketing organizations, with marketing leaders, and we wanted to talk about how do we actually move our teams beyond AI experimentation. So, John, maybe if you want to start with an introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Jonathan Milan, VP of AI Services here at Demandspring. We help basically CMOs and B2B leaders generate more revenue. And I get the fortunate role where I get to overlay AI into that effort. So, yeah, super excited to be here.
Great. So today we want to talk about moving beyond AI experimentation. So how do you recommend teams shift from going or operationalizing in a one-off experiments, doing a lot of kind of one-off activities within their teams or even within senior leaders or CMOs leading that themselves into embedded and repeatable workflows within their overarching go-to-market processes?
Yes, fun question because people are trying to figure out how to get beyond tools. But I'm going to start off. You need a tool. Believe it or not, I'm still shocked. I just had a client last week where, believe it or not, their IT department blocked any URL with .ai in it.
Oh,
So
wow.
any technology like Perplexity.ai, they can't access.
That's so
So there
helpful.
are still companies today where they're still struggling with, do they have in place policies that explain what they can do and how they can use AI? Check. Next is you do need a tool. Hopefully you have Gemini or ChatGPT or Copilot or something turned on, right? So you have to have that. And then the third one I say is kind of as baseline is hopefully you've given your team some training, right? So hopefully, so if we can kind of put that down as the baseline, remember like the T-shaped marketer, you need some skills to develop. I kind of feel like there's a baseline of AI skills and things that are needed. So those are kind of the three things that you kind of need to be there first. And then we can start to talk about how to go beyond tools and operationalize things. And what I find fascinating is a lot of people actually focus on the harder things with AI. So a lot of people are focusing on automations, complicated things that they do in their daily lives instead of finding things that are easier. And so what I mean by easier is that AI is an incredible tool to coach and enable us. So think about it as, Lucy, you talked about you do startups. Imagine you have a couple of chat GPTs designed to role play your board members or to role play your senior executives, right? And so it's a way to operationalize your thinking, your ability to deliver, your review cycles of stuff, helping you as a person first before the organization. So you'll see that I'm shifting the conversation to we keep talking about efficiency and effectiveness and stuff about organizations, but the low-hanging fruit actually is us people, right? And we're worried that AI is going to replace us. Well, let's actually use AI to help us get better at what we do and then go from there. So does that kind of answer where you're thinking with that question, or do you want to go a little deeper?
No, absolutely. And I think one area that was really relevant for me, especially in my last role, I partnered with you, within that role from an enablement perspective. And I think right now there's just a lot of like experimentation, but in some ways it's almost rogue experimentation because we aren't actually training folks on like how to use AI. What are the best tools for different kind of examples of initiatives or use cases? And so what's happening is people are having within a marketing organization having fear in terms of, hey, I'm being asked by a senior leader in the organization to go do AI, right? To do
Yeah.
something with AI. I don't actually have the tools potentially, or I don't have the knowledge of what to go do. And in some cases, it's like, well, what is the art of the possible? And so I think it's really important to think about enabling and training your team. This is a big technology shift for all of us, right? In the world in general, but certainly in the business world, certainly in a marketing function. And it's like, back in the day when maybe if you've been at a company that's rolled out a new CRM or a new piece of technology, you would never expect that you wouldn't actually give people training, a how-to guide, manuals, whatever it is. And I think we need to do that as well with AI. It seems like we just, in some cases, expect, a lot of our teams may be younger in terms of their career, and maybe you think of them as more digital natives, but it's still really important for training and development and that overall enablement up front. I think that that's just critical.
Yeah, and I think that rogue statement is very true. I think if you're not getting access to it, I think for some people it's very natural. They're going to try to get access to it and leverage it, and maybe in the incorrect way for the business, and maybe using data they shouldn't be. And
Right.
then you get the opposite, as you know, when we train people, that sort of certain people are still against it or are putting their head in the sand and are trying to avoid using it, right? So I think those are kind of the two
Right.
dichotomies we're seeing. And then I also struggle with when you meet most people, the first thing they usually ask somebody like me is like, what tool do I need to use? Which one's the best tool? And it's always that tool conversation. And it reminds me of, we do a lot of marketing automation here, right? With Marketo and HubSpot and Salesforce. It reminds me of the same conversation we had 15 years ago. Everyone was worried about, are they using the right tool? And I'm like, you can use any AI tool you want. Are you using it to its fullest? You know
Right.
what I mean? Like think about Microsoft Word or Excel is a great one. Like I remember 15 years ago, a buddy of mine was building a website off of Microsoft Excel.
Oh,
Like
wow.
stuff you never think could be like
Right.
that's how powerful it is, right? We're not even scratching the surface of what we're using with these tools. So the tool conversation usually for me is the wrong conversation. Do you have access to one? That's what I said is the foundation. And then from there, let's go, right? But I want to dig in something that you also said that's I think is super interesting too, is that a lot of people are playing with the technology rogue because it's fun and shiny, but
Right.
they're not identifying use cases or reasons for the business, right? So, like, how do we help them organizations move from this? We know AI is here, we know it's transformational, it's going to change the world. How do we help take it from this thing to operationalize it and finding the right use cases in an organization?
Right. Yeah. I think for me, I've been thinking about a lot about this. I think it's really thinking through where do you have gaps in your marketing outcomes? Where are you not achieving the business goals that have been identified or outlined? And really think about how can I leverage technology in order to solve that business problem? So I think like an easy example is with AI, you see a lot of folks using it for content creation for blogs or for social media posts or whatever it may be, a lot of content generation. But maybe that's not actually where you have gaps in terms of your overall performance. And maybe instead, like if you're having some demand generation challenges, not necessarily converting, say, your leads through the funnel into pipeline or whatever it may be, is there a way that you could actually utilize AI and the technology there for content creation or workflows specific to demand generation, right? So I think you have to take a step back and think, where is there a business problem that I'm trying to go solve? And can AI help me solve that versus like, hey, I heard of this cool use case and it seems like really fun to go like either leverage, some examples that maybe, peers in my network have given me, there's a
Yeah.
lot of, I think, sharing, especially on Slack forums and on LinkedIn and things like that of like, hey, here's a cool thing to go do, but like, is that actually going to help your business move forward? Because otherwise it's not a good use of your time or your team's resources of kind of doing experimentation that's not actually going to be relevant to your overall business.
Yeah, and I often like to describe this as efficiency versus effectiveness with
Yeah.
AI, right? And when you think about use cases, and I'm really passionate about those two E's because I find if you're an executive and you've been in the role and you've had VC funded companies that are all reading these reports, what I find fascinating is the reports always talk about efficiency. So they talk about like hours saved, your jobs being replaced, automation, and that kind of stuff. And what I find fascinating as a marketer, I think the conversation is actually on effectiveness. How do I make a campaign better? How do I write better? How do I make that piece of content I wrote as a human more SEO friendly or ready for the LLMs? Or, how do I create a better hook because I'm not good at that? Or, how do I create a better CTA to my landing page? I actually think the conversation is yes, we can measure effectiveness, but I think more executives need to talk about efficiency. And as soon as we get to efficiency, what's also fun about that is then it also kind of helps us marketers talk to our CFOs more about impact, right? Because effectiveness on hours and save, I think, yes, we should track some of the stuff. Yeah, I saved X amount of hours, using AI to, summarize this video as an example to make subtitles, right? No longer doing that manually or something like that. Great. Okay, so I saved a few hours, but how did we make this video more effective? How do we go into the topics more deeply? How did we do more research, for example, on preparing for a call like this? That's the kind of stuff I think that more people need to talk about. And some of it's a little harder to measure, but the only way we're going to improve in this world is becoming more effective because AI is going to increase efficiency more and more and more. Just like you said, content, right? Everyone's excited about, oh, I got AI to write 10 blogs for me that are, publish automatically, yeah, but how good are those blogs? How
Exactly.
deep did you go? Did you
Yeah.
add your twist to it?
Yeah.
Did you add extra any research to it, right? And I think that's where we marketers are going to spend more of our time on than kind of the low-hanging fruit that's, not providing a lot of value to maybe our readers.
I fully agree. And I think, when you're having conversations with the CEO or the CFO or whoever it may be of senior leaders in your organization, I think it's again tying back to like the business outcome and impact. And so I think part of that is you're doing AI initiatives within your organization, establishing like what are the goals you're trying to drive and actually like doing some testing and measurement, right? So that you can actually then be able to articulate it. In addition, I think it almost there's some analogy of going back to like, back in the days a long time ago, I was an email marketer at Dell in a demand generation team. And like we never reported out on, what was the open rate or the click-through rate. Like executives didn't care. Like that was irrelevant to them. Like what was the revenue that was being
Yeah.
driven or what was the pipeline being driven. So you have to think about like going back to a senior leadership team, they actually want to understand what is the impact of the business. They're asking potentially about efficiency because maybe that's how they think AI should be measured. Or when you hear about AI in the overall business context, it's all about like we can do more with less, but it's really helping. You need to help educate senior leaders around you and even some of your peers in your team below in terms of it's actually what is the business impact that this technology is going to make. Like any other technology that we use, whether it be our CRM, whether it be use other, sales tech, marketing tech, et cetera.
Yeah, but also like measuring the easy things seem to be where marketing and leadership has gone to, like open rates versus impact,
Right.
right? And so I think we need to kind of readjust that conversation. Actually, you're reminding me of a simple. We had a client and we did a very simple, fun workshop exercise with. So we started off kind of where you're talking about. We listed off a bunch of potential use cases that would have a great impact on the business, and we made sure we define really what the problem we're trying to solve, right? So it's not like we just want to do video for video, like why are we trying to do video and stuff. And then we simply created like a little metrics like this, and we measured on how easy would it be to do, and then how so and what would be the impact to the business.
Yeah.
And we kind of then started to put them in the quadrants, right? So low impact, harder to do is the bottom,
Right.
high impact, easy to do. And it was really fascinating just getting people to kind of pick where they landed. It was a very simple exercise to take all of these brainstorming ideas in the marketing because we have lots of ideas, right? And then just kind of prioritize.
Yep.
Okay, here's that's kind of the top five in this magic quadrant area. Let's dig into those further and figure out how to move them forward, right? So it's a very simple
Yeah.
workshop.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you just in terms of prioritization, right? Because I think
Mhm.
once you actually start to train and enable your team, there's a lot of ideas that can be generated. And it's really like, where should you best put your effort? I think one of the other things that you and I have also talked about is, how can you leverage and potentially look at prioritization based on the existing technology you have? So most marketing tech stacks have all kinds of different tools or pieces of software that they're leveraging today. All of those companies are launching net new AI capabilities or repositioning their product in some way around AI and automation. So I think there's also an element of like, is there an existing piece of technology we can leverage in order to move an AI idea forward and not necessarily have to change workflows and processes as drastically? Because I think there's like the impact piece, there's the resourcing piece, and then there's like, almost you want to gain some momentum in the organization so that
Mhm.
people feel confident in the work that's being done. And if you can leverage some existing technology or processes, that's a way to help drive, I think, some confidence in the organization.
Yeah. And one of the ones I love to do with that, like, and you talk about like the tech stacks we already have, is overlaying AI to be role playing in that process. So
Mhm.
whether it's email, whether it's your ad sets, whether or not it's your monthly report, what I mean by role playing is that you can have an AI chatbot or something play the like, hey, I'm sending this report to Lucy, my CMO boss. She tends to be a stickler on these details and these types of things. Can you review what I'm about to submit to her and give me some coaching advice on how to improve it, right? Or I'm like, we did some persona stuff I remember with your team, right? So
Yep.
how do you say, I'm going to write this email. It's for this specific segment that we're doing, right? How would they perceive it, right? Those are the types of things you can't really measure, but AI does it for us in a way
Right.
that's so much more impactful than we've ever done before, right? So this idea of automating everything, I think is the wrong lens. And I think executives are seeing that that's the wrong lens. It's like, how do we get better as a marketing team with what we do?
Right.
And I think if we can train more executives and more board members to understand that's where AI's impact is,
Right.
right? That's where it gets really exciting for us. But again,
Yep.
it's hard to measure.
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting, from the prompt training program that my team at Employ did with you. One of the outcomes of that was we had a QBR, and a lot of the team actually ran their QBR kind of talk track and slides and some of the content through, ChatGPT, I think, to say like what would the CMO's questions be coming out of this, or what would that person's feedback? And that was like I think a really fun exercise. So I agree. I think that that's a great use case as well. I think the other element that I've been thinking a lot about, I my background is heavy demand gen, but also like heavy brand, and I think a lot about the quality of what's being created in the output, especially from a content perspective. And to your point earlier, you can crank out 10 blogs, but are they actually good, right? And I think a lot about it as well when you're thinking about where to prioritize some of your AI efforts. It's like, what is the impact to your overall brand, and the overall message that you have in market? And sometimes there's an element of balancing kind of the humanness of content that's being created with also like trying to be more efficient. And I know I have a lot of, peers and friends in the content space who are, I think, really, trying to navigate this actively right now. I've actually seen even some of the upcoming marketing conferences that are, for fall season, a lot of topics around this as well. So just interested on your take.
I love that because I've never been a brand person. I was always more on the technical side and digital side. And brand was always kind of like the fluffier side to me. It's more like the creative side. Maybe that I shouldn't say it like that. But what's fascinating with AI is the conversation on brand is coming up more than I've ever thought about. And
Mhm.
even if you think about whatever we're going to call this GEO, generative engine optimization, or answer engine optimization, whatever term ends up landing as the norm, you'll hear that we're talking about brand visibility now,
Mhm.
right? It's not just like, is your brand being talked about or does your brand rank? We can now with AI also say, how are people talking about your brand? Where are they talking about your brand? Is your brand features, your platform features are being talked about in a positive way. So I actually think brand is going to be a very new, at least for me, maybe for others is not, but I think it's going to be a very hot topic in reports and stuff we do and things we measure going forward that I never thought about. I also think about when we look at AI and we think about, people talking about ourselves, I think sometimes the people within your brand are going to be bigger than your brand.
Yes.
So you know what I mean? Like some people are going to talk on behalf of your brand. Like Lucy, you're going to represent, a company. Maybe Lucy is actually bigger than the brand itself, right? So like Michael Jordan shoes is a great example. Jordan shoes are bigger than Nike, right?
Mhm.
So I think there's going to be something different because if AI is going to be keep, automatically producing all this content like you're talking about at a fairly low level, where's the personality and the brand going to come to on layer, right? And let's be honest, most B2B companies, the brand is not really a personality. It's the people in it who represent it, right? The salespeople, the marketing people, the thought leaders, the product management, and stuff like that. So I think there's going to be this really interesting layer about brand and people that are
Yep.
going to surface that's going to be very new. And it's going to be different for some large organizations to get trusted because they like controlling everything, right? And they're going to have to unleash some of this expertise internally.
Yeah. And I think that's exciting for marketers, right? That opens up kind of some new opportunities or even areas that maybe haven't been as invested in historically or in the past few years of all of a sudden like that is something that's critical and important. And how do you actually go, either pivot your resources or kind of do more there? I know you and I have talked about now the growing importance of things like press releases and content on Reddit and kind of other areas as well. And, when you have a small team, sometimes that's not as much of a priority. And so now, marketers and can kind of think of those areas as well and start to invest there as well. So I do think there's this like balance of I think there's so much like fear sometimes right now around AI in business and like what is it going to do to all of us? Is it going to impact our jobs or how is it going to impact our jobs? And I think there's also this element of like as especially as marketers, we're always having to pivot based on technology, the market, whatever is going on in the space that you're focused on, et cetera. And this is just another pivot, but it opens up some new opportunities in areas that maybe you haven't spent as much time in the past, and now you get to learn about, which I think is exciting as a marketer.
I'm curious though, like you talk about, change and we pivot and all that stuff. Are you, as a leader, are you thinking differently of like if you're going to redo an org today, right, for a team that's like AI first, have you kind of thought about how you would reorg your team and what skills you'd give them? And how would that shape? Like, I think a lot of us, there's no answer, I think, to this, but I'd be
Yeah.
curious just to pick your brain on what do you think you would do differently now than you did, let's say 12 months ago, right?
That's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think, you can kind of see some extremes where you hear of organizations that are like getting, rid of a lot of like full-time roles and really thinking about how do you have senior leaders manage AI agents. Um,
Hmm.
I think for me, the skills that I would look for is a few things. And I don't know that this is necessarily hugely different, but I think even more so important with AI. One is critical thinking, right? A lot of the outcomes and the benefit you're going to get from AI and the technology associated with it is dependent on you having the ability to think critically in terms of how can I prompt differently in order to get a different outcome, or how can I actually use this technology and tools in different ways. And so it's less around this rigidity of process and more around thinking about, okay, here's potential use cases, like what is the best use of that technology for my organization. I do think that it's really important for marketers is just really having comfort with technology and being
Oh
open
yeah.
to it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's table
for
stakes.
sure.
But I think even so now, like being in a place where you are open to more and more of trying new things and sometimes failing and moving on from it, right? And so just that kind of experimentation mindset or testing and rapid learning
Yeah.
mindset, I think is really critical. I do think that there's like a growing importance of, some type of operational functions in terms of as you think about over time, as you want to think about adding additional maybe AI workflows or whatever, like how do you actually operationalize that throughout your organization, especially for bigger companies or bigger marketing teams where it's really important to have process. You're going to need more people who are thinking more end to end about putting process in place, but then continuing to evolve those processes. So, I think that those are a few things. I think one of the things though marketers are going to be challenged with a little bit, and I've talked to quite a few, I have a lot of friends in marketing. Many of us went into marketing because we are people in some way, even if you're an introvert, right? Like you like leading teams, you like working in a cross-functional environment. You don't sit in a silo in marketing. You are, nearly everything is like a group project. You like working with peers across the organization. And so I think that there's this like, a little bit scariness of like, I don't want to be a leader that's just like managing AI agents. That doesn't sound very maybe motivating as you advance in your career. You want to help mentor people and grow them and things like that. And so I think that that's something that I don't think it's going to get necessarily to that extreme right now, but you do hear companies that are kind of trying to roll out that model. I don't know if you've kind of heard other examples like that.
Yeah, you definitely see a lot of like the AI SDR, let's replace the human, and some of these other kind of AI agents that are supposed to replace us. And the way I look at that is I've never been in a role in marketing where my process and my tactics are static.
Hmm.
And so this idea that then there's going to be this agent that can do this, and today they're kind of static, right? They kind of replace that existing thing. Then it's like, okay, great, let them replace that and let me move on to something else. So this idea of like I'm going to fire all my team members because I'm going to get what I do today at the same levels, like, well, that was kind of great to perform last week. I got to keep going. I got to keep changing. I got to keep evolving. Marketing, my competition, the industry is nothing static. So
Right.
this idea of using AI to replace static things, I struggle with that marketing. I know some people like to do it because it's shocking. There's a few brands on there that you'll see at trade shows that humans no longer needed, just AI agents. And I understand you're trying to do some shock marketing, but I just think you're missing the boat, especially when you're targeting marketers who know better that that's not the case, and the ones who've used it the most realize that there's more hype for sure than anything right now. But us marketers play, like you're saying, so many roles and so many different stakeholders, and we meet with so many things. We actually need AI the most, I think, out of almost every organization. Yes, I think AI coding, I think, is the number one use case. Sales and marketing are kind of number two, but I feel like marketing in particular, because we do so much role playing, we have to learn how to speak, product management speak, product marketing, go to market, executives, stakeholders, HR. We help with, internal communication. We're just playing so many roles, PR, leadership, right? We need AI the most to coach us and help us
Mhm.
because I don't know about you, Lucy, my budgets were never as big as I wish they could be. With AI, I can at least try to fill in some of those gaps.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, I fully agree. And I think it's, it's an exciting time right now. So maybe, just final question for you is just, we're talking about how to move beyond AI experimentation. And I know you've worked with quite a few organizations in terms of enabling and training and helping them think through an AI strategy. What is the kind of biggest tip that you would have for a senior leader or a CMO in a marketing organization in terms of, driving success within their team, say over, the next 6 to 12 months? Who knows what 2 to 3 years is going to bring?
Yeah, it's going to surprise people. The thing I think that's most interesting is educating everybody on AI. It's we keep saying, okay, if I give you a budget, Lucy, and you can buy some AI, I'm gonna like, what's the result? What's the ROI? And I think the expectations and the knowledge is very, very different. The definitions we use, the terminology, like someone starts explain to me, I'll come with you today saying, why aren't we ranking on Geo? What are we doing wrong? And we're not in ChatGPT, solve it marketing tomorrow. I think a lot of people need to be educated on what's happening, why it's happening, what do we think it's happening, because there's no silver bullet, first of all, and there's no actual perfect data. Like there's some data that just came out recently by this great company, and they're talking about how click-through rates on ChatGPT are way down and the number of citations is very different. And my first brain goes into, okay, so that's good. That means we're going back to SEO, so we're a little bit more comfortable for those people who know SEO. My second brain goes into, is this because a whole bunch of us aren't clicking on the stuff anymore because it's no longer novel?
Right.
So if you've done your first kind of search on AI overviews or Perplexity, you're poking around to see what's happening because you're
Yep.
curious. Is the first wave of curiosity done, and that's what's killed the click-through rates, and has nothing to do with technology, has nothing to do with anything else, right? We don't know.
Yep.
And I think that people who read this data or overreacted to some of these early data points, I'm a data-driven individual, but I'm a practical person, right? And I like to challenge this data to make sure that we're not overthinking some stuff that's very simple, right? So I definitely go into education, and I find the more senior you are, the more education you need.
Yep.
Because I feel like you're having conversations. Like we had a client, as recently, that the marketing team got trained, but the executive team didn't.
Right.
And so the disconnect now of understanding is much wider than it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, right? And so we got to keep that education and understanding aligned because, just like the word agent, as you remember, like is a custom GPT an agent or not? Like, I don't know. People call it is. I don't think it is. And I don't think it, like, to me, it doesn't have a lot of automation. You can
Right.
click on it. I can do the exact same thing as instead of instructions as a prompt. So as now as my prompt an agent, like there's some really hilarious definition challenges too.
Right.
I just think as long as our lingo as a team kind of gets unified and we kind of speak the same language, then I think a lot more clarity comes to us as an organization, right?
Yep.
So probably not the answer you expected,
No,
but
that's great. Yeah, that's super helpful. I think for me, it's, when I think about just AI experimentation and overall, it's like, as marketers, we've been doing this our entire career, right? Now it's AI. There are other things that we had to kind of continue to learn and evolve on. So that's that. And I think the other piece is, the fundamentals of marketing and B2B marketing haven't necessarily changed, right? This is a way of content is being consumed in a different way, and we need to adapt to that. But that's like anything else that we've ever had to navigate in our careers. And at the same time, there's certainly other elements that are still important in terms of your overall marketing strategy and plan. And so I think it's, how do you make sure that you're balancing the latest and greatest in technology in terms of how you can get work done and how content is being consumed by your potential target audience, but at the same time, like the fundamentals still remain, and don't lose sight of that and go well into, too much rapid AI experimentation to the detriment of other parts of what you need to do in order to deliver the outcomes for your business.
yeah, I think that's the best way to end today's conversation is that point there about fundamentals. I find it fascinating that there's a lot of marketers that are more project managers,
Mhm.
don't know the fundamentals. They can push and manage projects and they work with the external agencies, and that's great. But with AI, if you're a practitioner, if you can unleash those fundamentals so much more rapidly and so much more truthfully. And an example I gave, I think, to some of your team members was, how many of us have read the book about Simon Sinek, Start with Why? right? It does a great little description about why, what, how. It's a beautiful framework. He pitches it so elegantly. I love the video. It's like 12 minutes or 14 minutes. If you've never watched it, please look them up on YouTube. But the problem now is how do you execute that?
Right.
Right. It's like it's such a simple framework. You're like, I love it, but how do you execute it? With AI, I've got a partner now that can actually show me how to execute it.
Right.
And that fundamental is now easy to deploy.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of marketers have to understand. And you, before we got on the call, you and I were just talking about our kids going off to university. We got a few starting for the very first time. One of my fears about AI for my younger kids is that when are they going to get the opportunities to learn fundamentals clearly to then learn how to apply it if AI is leapfrogging that learning curve?
Yeah.
Right now, we humans have the ability to push AI to deliver our type of fundamentals. So maybe you like to use the ADA framework, maybe you like to use the Start Y framework, maybe you want to use April Dunford framework. I don't know. You have a something you've learned that you want to apply that's different than me. Right now, that's the beauty of AI. We can challenge ourselves and use different techniques. If our younger generation of marketers don't start to learn those habits, I don't know how they're going to get onto the learning curve to maximize
Yeah.
AI more. So that's one of my biggest fear about AI
Yeah.
is that learning curve that you may learn. But right now, for those who are practitioners, it's an amazing tool.
I agree. Yeah. And thanks for the time. I feel like we could spend a whole other hour talking about concerns of AI with our children. That's a whole other,
We could
trend.
do another episode. Oh, we should. We
Yeah.
could do that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Lucy. It was great. Talk to you.